Right. Now that there's a few people in the stream, let me know if anyone wants to see some of my other drawings. Figured I might wait until there's at least a handful of people. Otherwise, I'll just keep drawing. Sorry for the noise, that's our upstairs neighbor. I'm going to stop on this one for now, come back to it later. All right, I'm going to go through a few drawings and just kind of talk about some of the ones I like, some of the ones that I don't. I'm going to start back here in my pencil drawings. So these, I draw in a few different styles, and you can kind of see the progression from the beginning of this book to the end, starting with this. This is just kind of cheap color pencils and black wing for like all the dark. I never really finished that because I was trying to do an entire book of portraits. And this is just something I drew because I was sitting somewhere where there were cardinals. Let's see. Here's a little David Lynch drawing that I did the day that he died. These are in a Paper Republic passport size drawing book. And this book itself is bound in a way where you can open it completely flat, which is nice for sketching. I believe the pages are 180 GSM, so they're good for like a fine pencil. Like these, I did all with a Pentel Graph Gear 1000. This one is a 0.3 lead, so it's a pretty fine tip. So it takes a little bit longer, but in total, that was probably about 45 minutes to an hour for that drawing. I also use a Mono Zero for that. These are nice. You can cut the edge so you can get a really fine eraser point. And then there are kind of varying degrees of what my standard of success is. This was a total miss. This is actually Tom Segura. I went to see him live and I drew this in about 15 minutes. And it looks sort of like maybe Tom's cousin or something. Like, I think the eyes are right. And the nose and the chin are not quite right, which tends to happen a little bit more often when the subject isn't looking directly at me. This is a local photographer in San Francisco, Jake Ricker. This guy's interesting. I got the chance to talk to him a few times, and he has documented the Golden Gate Bridge every day for, I think, 6 years. So he's seen a lot of wild stuff, and he shoots entirely on film. That was about a 45-minute sketch as well. A lot of the time when I do these, I set a timer so I don't overwork them. And then I think for the next few, they're a little bit closer to the camera, or it's a closer in portrait. This is Greg Williams. He's a Leica photographer that I've liked for a long time. He shoots predominantly black and white. This was more of a quick drawing. I think it was about 30 minutes. So not a lot of like fine texture in here. You can kind of see it's sort of broad shading. This is Rodney Mullen, the best skater to have ever lived. Yeah, my daughter is a skater, and she, at the local park here in San Francisco, we were hanging out with a few people, and it was some of the more well-known Bay Area skaters and some people visiting, and one of them knew Rodney, and I showed them this drawing, and they sent it to him, which is pretty cool, because I grew up sort of worshiping this guy. This one I took a little bit more time on. I think this was about an hour and a half. Again, all done with a Pentel Graph Gear 1000, and it's a 0.3, so it's a really fine tip. I prefer those because you can get in for finer details in the eyes. And for the preliminary sketch, I pretty much start at the nose and build out, and since I'm right-handed, I draw the left-hand side first, and then work this way, so I'm not sitting on the graphite the whole time. That's Willie Nelson, hopefully, obviously. I guess he's well known to me. I'm from Texas, so it's kind of one of the legends. This one I took a little bit more time. This was about an hour and a half as well. A lot of the time when I'm doing these quick sketches, I try to do sketches where the reference photo isn't them smiling, because I sort of hate drawing teeth. But it's hard to find a photo of Willie not smiling. So this is a really quick sketch. This is Harry Dean Stanton. This one I think was about 15 minutes, which I like this style. You can see a little bit more of the rough cross hatching and the texture of his hat, which I did on purpose because he's wearing a loose weave straw hat. But I kind of like that it's a little bit more of a rough cartoon. This one, I guess, is relevant because we're on YouTube right now. That's Peter McKinnon. I don't remember which of his photos this is from, but I was trying to get one that's more of his intro face when he had short hair. I kind of go through phases of liking his videos and not. I feel like half the time he's talking, he's not really talking about anything. There's just 3 acts every video, so it's sort of that classic play style of sucking you into the narrative, even though there isn't really one. But I thought he'd be a good subject. Again, this is closer into the camera where, you know, the perspective that I'm drawing from. This is Sierra Farrell. This was the night that she won a couple Grammys. This one I never really finished. I don't really tend to draw a lot of women, mainly because this portraiture style is the newest to all of the art that I do. And the best way to explain it is the way that I draw. I pick an anchor point and I draw from there and sort of map out the distance of the face. And I'll use, depending on the size of the reference photo. Sorry for the noise, I've got to pick this up. I use this automotive 6-inch ruler, and that helps me get a little bit more of the fine details so the perspective is right. On hers, the reason I don't tend to draw a lot of women, there's fewer markers to draw from, in my opinion. So no facial hair, especially if it's a younger woman, there's no wrinkles. There's not as much as like, you know, as an example, look at some of these other guys. Like Willie's a good example. He's got a lot of wrinkles. He's got a lot of facial hair. So you can kind of map out little portions, block off certain areas and look at just shapes in the eyes. I can map out the shape of his actual eye. Whereas with younger people in general, same with Peter McKinnon, he's got a lot of mapping points on his face. So with her, you can kind of see the result is that there's a lot more detail in the roses in her hair and her eyes, which some of these I like to leave unfinished. Occasionally I'll go back and work on them as I feel more like drawing in graphite. This one I missed a little bit. This is Billy Boyd and Dominic Monaghan. Merry and Pippin from Lord of the Rings, or they have a new show, Billy and Dom Eat the World. Billy's nose isn't quite right, and I try not to go back and erase anything once I've started. So I just kind of let it go. And there were a couple other things that annoyed me, but I also thought it was just a funny photo of 2 guys. I don't tend to draw that small, and I rarely draw multiple people in the frame unless it's for a commission, which typically, for whatever reason, when people commission portraits from me, they typically want a few people in them. So that's a good example. I think Dom looks pretty good, in my opinion. Billy's slightly off. It's okay. This is Ari Matty, the comedian from Kiltony, or well, from Estonia, but more well known from that. Let's see. That one, I was kind of playing with a little bit more contrast in the background to make the subject come off the page and to make it a little bit less abrasive to have a really contrasted photo. If you were to see the reference photo, he's nearly blacked out on this side, just from how deep dark it is, which I like. It's a chiaroscuro, which is the photography style that I shoot as well. This is Scroobius Pip. He's a British MC and podcaster. This is another quick one as well. It was just an easier drawing for me. Usually the bigger beard, especially in graphite, is a little easier to do. But I liked how that one turned out. This is a quick one. I think it was 20 or 30 minutes. That's Michael Fassbender. Again, it's the chiaroscuro style where there's a hard contrast on one side. And what I always look at with these, I'll show you. As I'm drawing to gain not only perspective on it, but to make sure that I'm accurate, I'll cover one half of the face. And so this is the non-contrasted side where the light source was, and then this will be the contrasted side. And even though the contrast is slightly different, it's proportionate, and that one came out pretty close to how I intended it, which is, I wouldn't say rare, but it's always, you know, it's like 1 out of 3 I'll get them as close as, you know, as that is what I was hoping for. This is Gary Oldman. I'm pretty sure that's a photo that Greg Williams shot of him. And, you know, I don't typically draw a lot of people with glasses. It's sort of, even though it sort of contradicts what I said about mapping out the face and having ways to map out shapes, glasses always annoy me. I tend to get one side of the frame just slightly too small. And like I was saying before, I don't tend to erase as much unless it's in the preliminary beginning of the sketch. But there's a lot going on in this one with the hat and the glasses. That one, hopefully everyone knows, it's Brad Pitt as Cliff Booth. I really liked Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and that was just a fun character. I've drawn him a few different times as different characters, and I've missed pretty much every time but this one. And again, like, just little things, for example, the cut on his forehead, things like that, it gives you mapping points so you can kind of gauge from the hairline to the cut to the eyebrow. And usually with him, I noticed in a lot of the photos that I found, he either is very prominently like featured with his chin up or his chin down, looking straight down the barrel of the camera, which can be a little bit difficult with drawing his nose and his chin. This is Jack Kerouac. We live in San Francisco, and he's a local hero and also just a great celebrated writer. I would assume most people know about him, but he was one of the Beat Generation guys. This is a photo that I found at Vesuvio. It's one of the famous bars here that has a lot of history attached to it. With these, something I always point out is that the photo reference for this is an older black and white photo. And so what you get there is more contrast and less detail. And I actually didn't contrast his eyes quite as dark as they are in the reference photo. In the reference photo from this point up, it's pretty much black where you can't see the tops of his actual eye or the iris. And so for the sake of the drawing, I didn't go as dark on that, but I was pretty happy with how that turned out. This is another good example. This is based on a really, really rough black and white mugshot, and it just didn't come out quite like I wanted. It doesn't look terrible to me, but it doesn't look as close as to the photo I really wanted it to be. That's Dean, who was with Jack Kerouac. This is one of my favorites. This is Lawrence Ferlinghetti. He is a great poet. He was in World War II. He's a local hero as well. He was one of the key figures that opened City Lights Books. I liked how this one turned out. I like the harsh contrast in the background, so it makes the focus go a little bit more to the center, so you can see, you know, I think it draws you more to his eyes. He had this great old Stetson. It's got kind of a mule punch kick on the top here that I didn't get quite as shaded, but that's one that I had a lot of fun with. This is a longer drawing. Typically when they're that contrasted or there's patterns in their clothing, it's about, you know, somewhere between 2 and 4 hours. This one was 4, if I'm not mistaken. I also like that it does have a little bit of a ubiquitous gazer element to that photo, and he's slightly turned, so I was really pleased with how it turned out. This is Ansel Adams, and one of the rare photos of him without a hat on. And this one was about a 2-hour drawing. And again, there's a lot of features to map on. He's got facial hair and the wrinkles. It just makes it easier to get the proportions of the face right. This is James Baldwin. This one is a little trickier because it's also an older, heavily contrasted black and white photo. And he typically, in all the photos you see of him, his chin is very tucked down, and it can be a little bit deceiving in how it reads. So especially if you're drawing with a lot of contrast, it makes his head look a little bit bigger up here. And so I tried to do a little bit more of an even wash of graphite and shade. With some of these, I'll use a brush and I'll dust after I get a good amount of shading in it. And then I only do this about once or twice in a drawing. If you do it too much, you get a little bit, because it's a 180 GSM paper, you'll get a little bit too much of a grit to it, but I'll run my bare finger over it just to soften it. This is one of the misses, I think. It's not one of my favorite drawings. It's Kendrick Lamar. My wife was really fascinated with the NFL halftime show. I thought it was funny, so I drew him. It was also just kind of weird because he's wearing gloves. It's a little bit more than I like to map out, the gloves and the microphone. A lot of detail in his hat that I didn't necessarily want to do. This is Anthony Bourdain. Sorry about that. He was really tough. This is kind of a miss for me. There's not a lot of photos where he's looking straight at the camera. And although he has a lot of mapping features in his face that you can get for proper proportions, it's slightly harder to draw him, for me anyway. There's a few people I've drawn multiple times, and for whatever reason, they either always look like the exact same wrong person each time, or they look sort of like a melted version of themselves, and Bourdain is one of them. The other one is McConaughey. Every time I've drawn him, he looks like Glenn Howerton. This is John Barenthal. This is a fun one. This took about, I think it was about an hour and a half in total. I drew this one with higher detail, and then I softened it because I just felt like it looked a little better. He's like glistening a little bit in the photo, like a lot of flash was used without a diffuser, and so I wanted to soften it to make it not as contrasted. This is a young Bob Dylan. It's kind of a mess in my opinion. His nose is not quite right. I don't think it's on like a scale of 1 to 10 for me. It was a 4. But, you know, I think, again, like what I was pointing out earlier, there are elements of it that I feel really confident about. I like how his eyes turned out. I liked the gaze off this direction. It was a slightly longer drawing because of all the contrast. I also didn't contrast it as heavily as the reference photo. Most of his hair disappears into the background in the reference photo, as well as his right shoulder. This is one of my favorite photographers. God, I'm blanking on his name. It's funny. Talking on a live stream is not always the best thing for remembering things. Well, I'll have to come back to that. This one was a younger photo of him. And I don't really see a lot of photos of him at this age, so it was a little bit more of a challenge. Also, fewer things to map on his face. I did like how his glasses turned out, which is rare. I don't typically like the glasses in my photos. It's going to drive me crazy that I can't remember his name. This is Joaquin Phoenix as Doc Sportello in Inherent Vice. So one of my favorite movies. Love the cinematography. Big fan of the writer of the film and the director. But I like that one a lot. I don't typically like to draw hands, especially when they're more closer in the when they're closer in the foreground, because they distort some of it. And I sort of hate doing the detail in the hands, which maybe I'll get over at some point. But this is Carmi from The Bear. If you haven't watched it, it's stressful. I was pretty pleased with how this turned out. It was a quick drawing. This was about a 20-minute drawing. So I didn't focus too much on hyper detail. It was more about getting the contrast and the shape right. Jim Marshall. What's his name? There we go. Couldn't remember. That's Bill Murray. This one's actually an older reference photo, so he has quite a bit more hair here. I've drawn this one a few times in different mediums. I did it in ballpoint pen as well. I said earlier, I don't really like drawing teeth, which is usually true. It's kind of a pain to draw teeth, especially in ink. This is an unfinished one. I kind of gave up. I got really tired of looking at Frank Sinatra. But I I draw in North Beach a lot, which is the historical Italian neighborhood, and there's a cop that I used to see at the coffee shop, and he would always tell me to draw Frank Sinatra, kind of as a joke. I started drawing him. I'll come back to that at some point, but I don't know. Some drawings just don't. They don't, captivate me, so I kind of stopped. This is another one I bailed on. I'll go back and fix this at some point, but I've drawn him a few times and it hasn't quite come out. This is Val Kilmer in Tombstone. Again, it's sort of like half of the face is right, heavy contrast over here, and it's slightly off. It's also just an odd photo of him. And this one, no one will know, but this is my father-in-law's father. It's World War II era. I just did this one as like a little gift for the family. I liked it because he has this beat up open road Stetson, and he's wearing it in a lot of the photos from 50s and 60s. I think that's all my pencil drawings. And then here, there's a higher rate of failure. This is, so this last one, just to show you, is a Paper Republic drawing book. That's the one that opens completely flat. It's a little bit heavier. You can also paint in these. You can do watercolor in the white book. This is just a standard soft cover moleskin. The pages have a slightly like single layer wax coating to them, which can be nice for certain types of drawing. I use this for new methods. So I was working on Scribble method. That's kind of a failed attempt at Paddington's, one that my daughter picked out. I just told her to pick something to draw and she chose him. This is Mortimer. If you're not familiar with him, he's a British, I wouldn't say a comedian, but just a standard British funny guy. Has a lot of great shows. That one turned out all right. This is all just with a Parker Jotter. I can show you. These are all ballpoint pen drawings in this book. So this is a Parker Jotter. It's one of like the most classic American pens. It's a stainless steel body. The ink is a little bit more viscous than Bic, so it does glob a little bit. So I like to do Scribble method with it. So if you get too dark of a cluster, you can kind of work it around like paint almost. This is a Benicio del Toro from the Phoenician Scheme. That was a quick one. I think this is about a 20-minute sketch. This is Henri Cartier-Bresson. He's like the godfather of street photography. Something that drives me crazy about this drawing is that his hand looks crazy, but it's probably the most accurate thing I did in the drawing. He just had gnarled old hands. I also don't really like to draw a lot of things that have, like the camera. I didn't want to get too into detail here. I really like to focus on the eyes and face in the portraits. It's another Benicio del Toro from the Phoenician Scheme. This was a slightly longer one. I think it was about 45 minutes. With these, I don't do them in one sitting. I'll do them like 10 or 15 minutes at a time. This was, I can't remember who this was intended to be, but it didn't work out, and so I just kind of left it as it was. I thought it looked interesting. This is another one I bailed on. I forget the guy's name. He's Lloyd in Yellowstone. Not a huge fan of that show, but he just always shows up in the background of good movies and stuff. I bailed on this. I just got tired of doing all the black stuff. This is Arctic Assassin. I think that's the bull that broke J.B. Mooney's neck. It's a PBR sort of legend. I'm from Texas, so it's kind of general knowledge there, I guess. This one I went a little bit too heavy on the contrast. It's a really rough, low-res photo, so it didn't turn out exactly how I wanted. It's just a general bison head. I grew up in an area that had a lot of bison, so I tend to draw these, and this one's also heavy contrast, but I like that the eyes and the muzzle or the nose pop on it. It's George Clooney. That one I kind of drew as a joke. We were in Italy I know it's not super relatable, but we made a trip for the first time ever, and that was, people kept mentioning him in a really negative way, and I thought it was funny, so I drew him. This is Paul Whitehouse. It's another British comedian. I was pretty pleased with that. This is actually what I was drawing earlier. These are, so this one was a miss. He's a little too narrow, and it made him look a little bit more like Alf instead of a person. That was about a 10-minute drawing, and then here's a slightly more accurate drawing to the photo. This guy's actually, he's the father of one of the guys that we met in Lake Como. His son works at one of the docks in one of the small villages, and I took his son's photo and drew him, and he liked the photo so much, he asked if we would be in town again, if I could draw him as well. And so I've drawn him a few times to either send to him or bring back to him. But this one I'll eventually finish and do a little bit more contrast and a little bit more depth on it. So I'll show you the other color one. That's the one if you were watching earlier, or if you're watching this in the archive, you'll see what I was drawing for the first hour. This is Robert Carlyle. This is kind of a messy one. For me, the way I remember them is what I was watching or listening to, and this one I was watching something, so I was kind of half paying attention, sort of messed it up, but also a great actor. This was meant to be Sly Stone, and I missed a couple times on him. It looks like an actor portraying Sly Stone. This is also a missed Sly Stone. I was working on blending red and black ink, and it just didn't go over, which sometimes I go back to these or I'll use them as scratch pages to warm up the pens. This is Charlie Borman. Big fan of some of the stuff he's done. He's a great motorcycle rider. But this side is accurate, photo accurate. And this side almost is. His eyes slightly too close in. So if it were just half the drawing, I'd be really pleased with that. But it looks sort of like a pinched version of him. This is also a failed drawing of him. This one, none of it was good. It was kind of like a frustrated quick drawing trying to repair what I had missed on the first one. Eventually I'll draw him and get it. These were quick ones, also some that my daughter chose. So I just tell her to pick an animal and then I draw that animal. It's all scribble and cluster method just to sort of cluster contrast together. Another elephant. And again, these are all the black ones are done with a Parker Jotter. This is another miss. This is Sean Penn, or was meant to be. Not really anything in that was good. But I try not to tear any of them out. This is Tom Baker's Doctor Who, the fourth Doctor. It's my favorite Doctor Who. This one I did with the Bic pen.